Last week, when I looked at one of my main trees in my property, I saw that it had a pretty good case of sunburn, and it put into mind that we'd really like to get some information and be able to have some information to share with the club on these very special beings and trees that surround us and give us our oxygen and protect us. This morning, we have John Bornsworth, owner of Peninsula Environmental Group. He's one of 8 board-certified master arborists and a registered consulting arborist in Washington State. John provides urban forest technical support to public agencies across Washington State and is commonly retained as an expert witness on tree and vegetation-related matters. John lives in Port Angeles with his wife, Courtney, who works at the Land Trust, and son, Oliver. Thank you, John, for being with us this morning, and we'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Kathy. Can you hear me okay? Nice. Well, yeah, thanks for the introduction, Kathy. And I'm John Bornsworth. So I woke up this morning and I guess earlier this week I talked to Kathy and she asked me to come on, and I said, sure, that makes sense. But this morning I woke up and I had nothing prepared. So I saved a bunch of pictures and wrote up a big itinerary. So I think I have enough prepared for half an hour, and I have a lot of photos that are pretty interesting to look at. So I think we'll go from there. Kathy already kind of introduced, who I am, and what I do. A lot of urban forest planning, tree legal issues, and tree forensics. I am going to share my screen. Let me do that right now. Can you guys see my screen full of interesting tree things?
Yes.
Excellent. So I think one of the more, I guess one of the first things to think about is, what is an arborist and what do arborists do? And I think that when people say arborist, a lot of people think about this guy standing on top of the tree with the chainsaw and all of his cool gizmos. And, that is the perceived arborist working on trees and cutting trees and removing them. And that is accurate. That is probably 95% of arborists are people who are in trees, modifying them and cutting them. And then maybe 5% of arborists are this guy with his hard hat on near a very, very small tree, looking at it for some reason. Maybe pest or disease, or maybe he anticipates some sort of risk somehow. Yeah, so most arborists are climbing trees, in trees, cutting them, and and then a small percentage are kind of analyzing and consulting. I am the latter. I consult on trees, and it's an important part of the conversation related to managing trees. A couple of things that this guy or myself will be doing is looking at pest diseases, analyzing risk in trees, things like that. One thing that Kathy mentioned I could kind of talk about is, I guess there's 2 other things I'm going to talk about. One is, when to call a consulting arborist, when to call someone who can look at trees, and why you would do that. And then the next would be just be a short rundown on tree-related legal matters and how those are managed in Washington State. But yeah, first thing, when to call an arborist. So, there's a lot of different, I ain't got a good picture of this, but right now there's a lot of different trees we can see from that last, from the 3 weeks ago, they're 100-degree weather, all the way from Vancouver to Olympia, and then from Snoqualmie to Seattle, and even on the 101 in our region, we're seeing pretty significant damage on a lot of our Douglas firs, especially. And some of that is some needle die-off, but it's not the needle die-off that we would anticipate this time of year. It's simply due to the extreme heat wave that we had and the lack of water in the soil that the trees can use to accommodate that heat wave. Next time you're driving on the 101, just look out and you can see that these trees look like they've been burnt. Like literally like they caught on fire, and you look closer and they're just crisped up, dry. That is not a reason to call an arborist. When you look at a tree, we call this depleted. When you see a tree that's been depleted in your yard, and that is like a lack of that nice green, crisp green color, or if it's just less dense, like you can see through it more than you did last year. A vast majority of the time, that is simply the tree needs more water. And we're seeing that extensively more just with climate change and the fact that our droughts are extending much longer and with much more intensity than they were formerly. I wanted to point out too, if anyone has any questions, feel free to jump in. This is not a formal, PowerPoint presentation, so feel free to ask a question if you have it or not. Yeah, all of these trees are crisping up and they just need to be watered. And that's kind of what I was pointing at, is that, all of these trees that you have in your yards, if they're looking at, browning, or if there's less dense needle activity or leaf activity, the majority of the time it's just water. Fertilization is kind of a gimmick. Very, very rarely does anything need to be fertilized. And when I say deep watering, that really means, a very low flow output on a hose, and over the course of 12 to 24 hours. Some people will do deep watering for like a couple of hours, but that's not deep watering. A lot of trees in our region will have little horizontal cavities like this. These cavities are about a quarter to half an inch in depth, and approximately the same in width. These are sap sucker holes. Sap suckers are little. There's a red-breasted and yellow-breasted sap suckers, and they are little birds that I think they're 3 or 4 inches, maybe just 3 inches. They're actually they've mastered agriculture in the bird world. So what they're doing is they're just forming the cavity just enough to have the tree release sap. Insects go into that cavity and try to eat the sap, and the bird actually goes back and eats the insects. They don't care about the sap. Sap's not their preference. They want those bugs. So they're farming insects by putting those cavities into trees. These are very inconsequential, insignificant to the tree. The tree is totally fine with these sort of things. And we see these very commonly in our area.
And I got a question for you right off the bat. So
yeah,
we got one of those woodpeckers that are banging on our house all the time. So it doesn't make sense if it's drilling holes for sap. I mean, our wood is not giving off sap, right?
I think this is probably what, though, if you hear it, this is probably what you're looking at. This is the pileated woodpecker.
Oh, okay.
This one he goes in deep. These things are 6 to 8 to 9 inches long, big.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. He's much bigger.
Yeah. And you'll hear it, you'll.
Yeah. I've heard it. Yes.
And these things are actually, they're forming, dens for themselves. They live in these, and then they also collect food in them. So interestingly enough, woodpeckers like this, the pileated woodpecker, this would be what we call a secondary, secondary stressor. The fact is that a healthy tree with healthy wood cannot be penetrated by the woodpecker. It'll try, and a lot of times they do try, but then the tree will release too much sap. And then there's also a lot of chemicals that the tree releases that the woodpecker doesn't like. So if the tree is healthy and vigorous, the woodpecker's gone. He's looking for the next tree, and he is looking for the tree that he can get access to, which is the tree that's stressed and decayed, just not doing so well. And when I say decayed, in our region, in pretty much the Pacific Northwest and most of America, decay is formed. So I don't really say it. Decay is caused by one thing, and that is fungi. So fungi causes decay in trees all the time, living and dead. So like, you have a home and it's built out of wood. That wood was undecayed wood when it was alive. Now that that wood is dead, it can also be decayed. There's two types of fungi that affect trees, and these are something that really, fungi is important because these can cause 95, 90% of these issues that I see are related to fungi. So fungi can come in two main families. One is parasitic and one is saprobic. This fungi is saprobic. What this is doing is it's a small, very fleshy body. If it just feels like the mushrooms you eat on your salad. It has that fleshy feeling. It's not very stiff, and it's usually very annual, and very small. You see these all the time growing on bark, on dead leaves, maybe on dead leaves. These things are just decaying dead organic material, and that dead organic material could be just soil constituents, different nutrients in soil. It could be decaying leaf matter, it could be decaying bark matter, it could be, in this situation, it's decaying this wood in this tree. But these fungi are not really an issue because the trees, it's already dead. There's nothing going on, and more than likely this tree is not a tree that you're scratching your head thinking about it being healthy or not. This tree has no leaves, is the bark is coming off. It's visually dead. Where it becomes more confusing is where we see conchs or more woody type of fungi. So this is an artist conch, Ganoderma appelantium. This is the conch that they'll go and draw on the underside. This is a parasitic conch along with that one.
So John, are those not good then? I'm assuming, because whenever I see those, I think they're beautiful, and I'm like, oh, that's cool. So
Yeah,
not good.
no, they are cool. I think that's they are a necessary component of living activity, forest activity, and that is decomposition, right? So like you put your decomposition, they and also the calling of the week, wild is a pretty wild place. These fungi attach themselves and colonize weak trees or stressed trees, trees that are genetically inferior or trees that are growing in the wrong place. They'll attach themselves, colonize, and decay that tree and kill it. And that is the food source for the next 1,000 years of trees. So they play an important part, and that part is very beautiful, I think, and very interesting, but they are killing the tree 100%. These conchs are woody. They're not annual, the perennial. This actually, you can see on this one, these are annual rings. That's not a ring. Annual growth cycles is all of these little undulations on these edges. And sometimes it's not always exact, but usually those are representing years. So this is, this is actually, its roots. It's not really called roots, but its roots are in the tree, up and down, left and right, and decaying that. Here's another one. This one's a little more fleshy. This is an edible. I believe that's an edible. But you can see here as well, like this tree is decayed, visually decayed. Normally, when you see these type of woody conchs on the right here, that tree is not decayed. That tree looks healthy, which can be where it gets a little confusing. And even if you were standing on the opposite side of this fungi and you had not seen it, that tree could look very very healthy. This one is one of my favorite. This is a chicken of the woods, and you cut it off and you put it in some pasta sauce, and it tastes like mushrooms, but its consistency is like chicken. It's delicious. This one also is decaying, significantly decaying the trees. This one's interesting. This is a slime mold. It is one of the only, well, I think maybe the only organism that's multi-celled, but has only one type of cell. This is a single, I don't know exactly the name it is, but it's like a kind of like a single-celled organism with multiple cells. It's just the same thing everywhere. Yes, slime mold. I'm sure people have seen this. This is a turkey tail. It's used in a lot of medicinal qualities, ground up and used in tea and whatnot. This is another one that just decays dead trees and doesn't actively kill them.
So John, what would bring on the slime as opposed to, does it come in just in certain conditions, wetness or dryness or?
Yeah. It is very much so a wind distributed organism. So it will release spores just like fungi on the underside of most fungi, but the slime mold will do the same thing. And it really, a lot of ecological management and perspective on ecology is, and landscape scale ecology is just, a lot of very small kind of random occurrences cause the spread of organisms. So just the right climate at the right time and the right wind speed causes this slime mold to move around, as opposed to this this fungi. So it really is, there was a lot of science back in the 80s and 70s and before that trying to figure out exactly why populations of plants exist here and as opposed to there. And it used, and a lot of the theory is coming down to just random coincidence in just the right conditions. So there's another cool, very interesting thing that we have in our region. 10% of all of our Douglas firs in the western side of Washington, I think it's 5 to 10%, are affected by Dendroctonus pseudosagii, which is the Douglas fir bark beetle. And that's him right there. That's the adult version.
John, how exactly does that thing, which I can't pronounce, directly affect Doug fir in terms of injuring or killing them?
Yeah. So the so this one's the Douglas fir bark beetle, and it affects Douglas fir, and so in the fall, these little adult larvae will land on the tree, bore inside just a little bit. They usually form colonies, and they have these very large epicenters where they're all around a forest or a community of trees and trying to find the right tree. They want the right tree, one that they can actually access. When they find that, it's interesting. They release pheromones, and those pheromones attract all the others. So when one gets inside of the tree, when one of the adults actually accesses the tree, he calls all of his friends, and they come in that tree and they attack it. They lay their eggs. They're not actually eating any wood. They don't eat the wood. No, none of our insects in our region eat wood. They're just kind of gnawing at it, and they're eating some of the sugars that are in the tree. What the actual issue is that they are causing a so this is the gallery that they leave. This is their actual transit up and down, and then these lateral areas, and this stops the tree's ability to move nutrients upwards into the upper foliage. And usually when these pests really have an outbreak, there's a significant number of them in that tree. So that's it. They just basically cut off the tree's vasculatory network.
So that eventually kills the tree, and then the fungi move in.
Right. That's exactly what happens, and it's pretty interesting. The on the feet of our little, maybe it's the wings, actually. I think it's the wings. On the wings of our little Douglas fir bark beetle is a unique fungus called veiled cup fungi. And that fungi actually just kind of lives with the beetle, and they have a symbiotic relationship. I'm not sure what the beetle does for the fungi is move it around. I'm not sure what the fungi does for the beetle, but that fungus will invade the tree, grow little modules on that tree, and actively decay the tree quicker. So even if the tree has not been really killed by a colony of or an outbreak of these pests, the tree could eventually die from that fungi, from the fungi. And so it's kind of a dual method there.
So John, I have a question, and I think this is fascinating. I love it. But you mentioned another part of your role is a legal one.
Yeah.
How does the arborist come in, and in terms of the legal aspects?
Yeah. So and that works out because that was basically the end of that section. So where I come in as an expert witness commonly is is in this scenario where there was $500,000 worth of damage done to a house, and maybe this tree is owned by the city, a city somewhere, not PA, or maybe this tree was owned by the neighbor, and this homeowner had told the neighbor, "Hey, I'm afraid of that tree," or maybe maybe the neighbor cut some, or maybe the next door neighbor who where the camera is installed a house recently and cut the roots just 6 inches from the base of that tree as they're putting in their foundation. So that is the one of the larger components of well, I guess not just that, but also so in Washington State we have and in a few different states we have timber trespass statutes. There's 2 statutes in Washington State that I commonly see myself working within, and that's the timber trespass statute and the waste to land statute. The timber trespass is fairly simple. It's the historical precedent of that timber trespass was the logger who is walking his boundary line, cutting trees for his client, and he accidentally cuts a tree over the boundary line, or maybe the flags weren't installed close enough for him to see, and he accidentally cuts a tree off, on some other property, and that's kind of where the timber trespass statute came from. It's been in our books in the state for a long time. It has a mechanism to assess treble damages onto the person who committed the trespass, as long as that person actually had wanton disregard for that property line and not simply made a mistake. If they were a logger and they just made a mistake, they would be assessed for the value of that timber, but not the treble damages. If they were walking their line cutting trees and they looked inside and said, "Oh, that looks like a nice tree, I'm going to get that one," that would be where treble damages come in. But loggers have really fixed that over the time with GPS technology and just probably decades of being sued. They don't really do that much anymore, and now timber trespass is significantly used for homeowners who accidentally cut other homeowners' trees, which happens very frequently. And the same kind of thing exists. If your neighbor cuts down your tree, there is a potential for a treble damages award onto that onto the trespasser. The valuation of trees. So that's part of what I do, is value trees. It's kind of a subjective, obscure concept, but tree appraisal is has a long history, and the appraisal of trees can have a substantial cost. So it's good not to be involved in any of those kind of, at least on the cutting end of any of those issues. Another thing we commonly see ourselves in is view related issues. So we live in a state that has a lot of views, and trees grow in views and block them. So there's a lot we do on that. One thing I wanted to mention, which I think is important, is there's 2 different types of trees that relate to boundaries. One is a boundary tree, and I wish I there's a boundary tree and a border tree. So if your property line is right there, homeowner A and homeowner B, those trees are clearly owned by each property owner. and those would be, obviously, but if this borderline is, or if this property line is right there, now this one tree is common property and is duly owned by both property owners. And in Washington State, we're one of the states that identifies that uniquely as that, even if it's right there, this tree is still 50% owned by both homeowner. It does not matter what proportion of trunk is extending over the line. And uniquely enough, if this tree was planted by your grandfather and 50 years ago it was, or 100 years ago, it was like that, but it does this, that tree is now owned by both property owners. So something to think about.
Mm.
Hey, John, this is Rebecca. I've got my camera off because I have the wrong computer. Anyway, some people say I now have the biggest madrona in town because the one on 8th Street went down.
Yeah.
I can't get the city. I have a sidewalk that's infringing on it, and I think it's probably making the madrona really unhealthy. Can you help me get the city to let me remove the sidewalk?
So I sit on the Washington State's Urban and Community Forest Council, and we had a lot of discussions on the first madrone, and trying to retain it. And then I also had a lot of conversations with the city of PA on that first madrone as well. I think we could try, but I do not think that Port Angeles is, out of all the cities that I work in, which is very many, they're very low on their desire to try to be outside the box, at least in that kind of sense. Not to dissuade you, but it would be a low. I doubt it would happen, but we could try.
I'm calling you after this meeting.
Nice.
I have a question also. This is Laurel. There is a real interesting close-up of bark in the middle of your screen that's called download.jpg. Yeah, that one. What is going on there?
Yeah, this is a sap sucker. This is the same as this one, just it's a different tree. So like, this is probably older, this is maybe 3 or 4 years older. And the way that the bark extends on this birch tree is different from the way the bark grows on this spruce tree. So these were very small, and then they just kind of opened up. And, yeah, I think that's what happened. And yeah, you can see that horizontal mechanism right there. And there's the horizontal. It just looks funny.
Yeah, I thought it was a real interesting pattern. I'd never seen anything like that.
Yeah, it is. I wonder if these were like 2 holes, 1 and 2, that kind of just opened up in the middle, maybe.
Mm. Yeah, I thought I was looking at an alder, but it's in the same family.
Yeah. These horizontal lenticels make me think it's and then just maybe some of this flappiness on the bark make you think it's a birch.
Mm.
But I mean, it's a very small area of the tree.
Mm. So this wouldn't hurt the overall health of the tree from what you said earlier. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah, but it also is a proportional thing. Like if this is over over a 10%, 20% portion of the tree, it's fine. But if this is over a 75% portion of the tree, it's less fine.
Is that the same effect as a tree being girdled?
Yeah. I think if it's certainly if it was like if this was all the way around in multiple places, that would be girdling.
Mm. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
So we've reached our time in the meeting. John, fantastic presentation. Really, really fascinating. I think all of us learned something for sure.
Thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, it was
John, do you
great.
have time to stick around for other questions? I'll keep the meeting open and if you have time.
Oh yeah. Yeah. If there's any more questions, I'm
Contact
happy to
info?
stay.
Is it in the invite? His contact information?
John, can you put your phone number in the chat group? Rebecca would like to give you a call.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Kathy has it too.
Yeah, Rebecca, I'll send you his email.
Thank you so much. We're gonna do it, John. Sidewalk, boom, gone.
Yeah. Yeah. I will say that the owner of the Madrone, they were not very, I contacted them numerous times and they were not very, incentivized themselves or so I mean it may be someone who really want how do I do this who really wanted to do it could make it happen.
I've talked to one. I think he's open.
Now, it's many years ago, Kathy, but when I was at the bank, we dealt with the issue with the city. And I second John's comment about being highly bureaucratic as a historical practice at the city. Boy, I tell you, if it's not in the book, they don't do it. And but I'm telling you, in those days, they were much more concerned about the damage our tree was doing to their sidewalk than vice versa.
And that's still a historical, that's still a thing. You know, a lot of times we'll have beautiful ancient trees that are, you know, older than anyone here. And you'll have someone at the city of Tacoma or somewhere else and say, well, that's damaging the sidewalk. And well, the sidewalk's 10 years old, take it out, put a new one in.
Yeah.
Anybody else has more questions for John?
I have a question for John, back to his boundary line trees.
Yeah.
Where on the tree is that determined? So if phototropism takes a tree top across the line, but the stump is completely on the other landowners, or is it a vertical plane that any portion of that tree intersects, it makes it co-owned?
So it's the stump. It is where the stump lies. And there has been some case law on how exactly that stump is measured. If it's, so there's some trees have a very large buttress, like a Western red cedar might have a, you know, its buttress roots at the ground level might be 2 feet beyond where the actual trunk is. And then that has been a thing in a court where like, is that buttress where the property line has to meet, or is it the actual trunk? And then also, interestingly enough, if this has happened before, where if a trunk of a tree, of let's say a madrone is on your property, and it, you know, they bend very extravagantly, and if it was bent over your property line and in someone else's entirely, technically that person would have some right to stop that above ground encroachment of your tree and to prune that tree. I think there would be an interesting, this has never happened before, but it's been discussed a couple of times where, you know, if that neighbor cut the tree off the property line and it was just the trunk of the tree, and now that tree is dead, are they in their right managing that aerial encroachment, or did you just have your tree murdered? It's a little interesting scenario.
I
To answer
can
your
tell
question,
you
it's
from
based-
experience on that, John, that the county, I used to be county administrator,
Mm.
county road right away, we've had during my time as administrator, we had numerous threatened lawsuits, and 2 that actually went to court for that very issue, that the trunk was on the property line, but the branches hung into the road right away and created a hazard to navigation.
Mhm.
And we were able to prune them. Now, we didn't kill a tree, but we pruned the hell out of them, and they look really bad.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's, I mean, it's, you know, it's above ground encroachment. You know, as much as someone might love their tree and want their tree growing, someone else wants their that space. And I think it's a valid right to that person.